The Million MAGA March in
Yes,
DC.
yes.
Oh, what is that?
That's something we could talk about. Yeah, okay. So tensions flare between Trump supporters and opponents at DC protests. Tensions flared after Dark Saturday as pro and anti-Trump factions clashed in Washington, D.C., hours after the president himself made a drive-by appearance at a recount rally attended by thousands of his supporters. In one incident, 3 Trump supporters were eating at a restaurant 2 blocks from the White House when someone set off fireworks in their direction. Dramatic video captures of the moment the projectiles zoomed over tables as some ducked or ran out of harm's way. Another clip captures a group of counter-protesters trailing 2 men identified by a witness as Trump supporters on the sidewalk, yelling, "Get the fuck out of here," and throwing water from a bottle at one of them. Footage posted by ABC7 in Washington also captured a biker being pushed to the ground and doused with water. After he stood up, he raised 2 middle fingers at the people around him. And yet another video, a group pummeled a man and beat him over the head with a flagpole. Jesus Christ.
I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brain.
That's the news.
Yeah.
All these other ones were like, oh, like some fireworks passed by their table and someone got wet. And this is the poster. The host of a conservative web series, claimed the victim was a Trump supporter and his assailants were members of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Another clip taken before dark shows a man shoving and pushing another man who yelled, "Get the fuck out," over a bullhorn. In return, a crowd surrounded him, shoving and punching him until he face planted on the street. He was left dazed, bloody, and barely able to stand, a separate video shows. In total, 10 people were arrested during the protests and 4 for firearms violations, 2 for simple assault, 1 for assaulting a police officer, 2 people for acting disorderly, and 1 for what the Metropolitan Police Department described as no permit, the local NBC station reported. It was unclear if those arrested were Trump supporters or counter-protesters.
So they called this the Million MAGA March?
Yeah, I'm willing to bet it was less than 1 million people.
Well,
sounds like that was branding,
right?
But I mean, did they ever distinguish like who was starting the violence? Like, was it Antifa and Black Lives Matter, or was it the Trump supporters, or what? Or was it a mix?
I don't know. I really can't tell from these videos because the problem is they'll post these videos, but they'll be like edited. So you'll see part of it, or you'll see,
sure.
You'll see a picture, but you don't know the context or what happened before.
See, this is something that bothers me, is that a lot of like left media people on YouTube and and like corporate media, they'll never really discuss, unless you're Fox News, I guess, they'll never really discuss leftist violence. They'll always bring up that like, oh, this right organization started to, like, they say like, oh, the Proud Boys were being violent in Portland, or like every single time you ask someone about the violence occurring during these protests, they'll be like, well, what about that right leaning group who were like kidnapping the governor of that town? It's just like, okay, but what about like everyday instances where Antifa is like throwing Molotov cocktails at businesses?
But the bizarre thing is the police don't do anything about this, and there's no repercussions.
Yeah, certainly in some cases. There was this one guy. Do you remember the video of there was that Antifa guy? I think he was Antifa. He might have just been a protester or a rioter, but basically this group like stopped this guy's car. Excuse me. And they were like, "Get out." And he was like, "What?" And so they like opened his door, they threw him on the ground, and they started like beating the shit out of him. And then he sits there, he's dazed, and everyone kind of disperses except for one guy behind him, like does a running start and like field goal kicks him in the like side of the temple, and then the dude just like hits the ground unconscious. And this guy had no affiliation, it seemed. It seemed like he was just trying to navigate through this protest, like driving through it. And I think it was just because the guy was white. Like they just stopped him and then beat the shit out of him. And he had to stay in the hospital for like a week. And then the dude who did the kick, I believe they just recently said he got like 2 years. He's getting like 2 years or something in jail. But it's like he could have murdered that dude.
Yeah, well, there is something weird that happens. I mean, what happens with animals and with people, where it's like there's like this mob mentality. It like turns into a feeding frenzy. Like
tribalism.
Like violence starts happening, and then it's like other people feel like they like compelled to join in.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, and I don't remember where I heard this point of view, but I liked it. It seems kind of right, where they were like, this is why we need sports, because like if you take sports away, that's where like sports is kind of like where people are pointing their like tribalism towards. Like that's kind of like where they're getting that energy out, where it's just like, oh well, my team is like the Packers or my team is the Steelers or whatever. And once you kind of strip that away, or it becomes less, then maybe people look for other like subconsciously look for other ways of having tribalism.
Well, yeah, these things exist for a reason. I mean, sports, there is definitely a very competitive nature with people.
Yeah, and like the reason why tribalism exists is because it's a way of survival. Because like if you stick with a group, you know that you're going to be stronger within a group than you are like individually.
Yeah, hierarchies are natural. That's kind of like an extension.
When there's a combination of like people feeling like they're fighting for a just cause, they feel like violence then is something that's like permitted, like that's something that's acceptable, because they're like, well, we've tried doing change through like shutting up and like doing petitions and shit like that, but that's not working. So now it's just like a subconscious switch where they're like, okay, this is what happens now. We're gonna blow up this dude's fucking like small business in like a strip mall.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is.
They're justifying acting. Here's the thing to me, right?
Yeah.
Because if what you're doing is so righteous and these people are so terrible, how can you justify doing worse shit than them to them? Like, what?
What I don't really get is why these small businesses? Like, why would you target like these small businesses? I almost sympathize with Target, or not with Target. I almost sympathize with them about Target, where there's just like, yeah, burn it down. Who cares?
Right.
They can afford it. But if it's like, Joe's Pet Shop, actually that's an awful example. That's a violent example.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah, if it's like Charlie's Pita Shack or something, like that's someone's like small business. Like and a lot of these people, like a lot of the rationale is these rioters will be like, fuck it, they have insurance. And it's like, not all of them. You don't know if these people have insurance on any of their shit.
See, but I think that's justification after the fact. I don't think that's what's going through their mind while they're doing it.
No.
I think while they're doing it, they don't give a shit what they burn down. And then when somebody calls them on it, then they have to come up with a bullshit reason.
Yeah, I could see that. And also, in New York, there was a point in New York where it got so bad that the police were like, just let them loot. Let them loot. And they even Sid, they were just like, let them get it out of their system. And like the public heard this and they're like, okay, let's go fucking get a new TV.
Right. Well, okay. So now I just remembered my point I was going to make. Okay. So remember when Antifa first showed up and they would show up at like colleges and universities?
Yeah.
So at Berkeley, there was a pretty big incident and there were cops there, and they were standing by, and they were just standing there watching all these people fighting. And somebody asked one of the cops, like, what are you doing? Why aren't you going in? And the cop said they were told to stand down by the mayor or whoever was their, supervisor.
Yeah.
So that's a microcosm of what we're seeing. They're doing the exact same thing. They're just out in the fucking streets now in the public, and they're doing the exact same thing. They're not do anything to stop them.
Hey, thank you for listening to Two Party Breakdown. If you liked what you saw, smash that like button. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily political content. Thanks.